And what's up? Welcome in. It is GC Live Monday episode of the show. I'm Wes. He is Chris, and we are glad that you're here. I'm going to apologize in advance if you are on the live show. I'm getting a little bit of a notice here of a connection issue. I'm hoping it's not going to be like before. Those of you who know back, I don't know, maybe January, we had lots of issues over here. We thought those were completely fixed. Everything's been great so far since we got to cross your fingers that the connection will hold and will be good. So we got a lot to talk about. Again, I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. You are on GC Live. Thanks for joining us either live with the video version, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or with the audio version that's posted pretty quickly after the fact on every single major podcast platform. Lots going on. Of course, we're going to get into tons of recruiting. That's sort of the big focus right now, both within the South Carolina football program and, of course, with our coverage on GamecockCentral.com. Gamecocks add 2 public commitments in a span of 2 days. And, of course, we'll talk a good bit about that and get into some other things that Chris and I either saw or heard from a 7-on-7 plus O-line, D-line camp on Thursday and Friday this past week, and then a regular traditional camp on Saturday. So, Chris, plenty to get to, man. What's going on?
Oh, a lot, man. We are trying to catch up. I just got off an appearance with the guys on 107.5 The Game, and they were kind of asking if things had slowed down any. Common question. Answer is no. Only difference is we're not physically out at a camp today. Checking that out as we have been, 8 times now, 8 camp days. So today's about catching up, continuing to gather more info, double back on some things that we learned from camp. And obviously, over the past couple of days, 2 commitments, as you said, for the Gamecocks. So still plenty to get to, still a lot to do, and 2 more team passing camps and O-line, D-line camps coming up later this week as well. So still a lot going on in Columbia for sure.
Yeah, quite proud to say we are now 8 of 8 again. So we've continued. Gamecock Central has continued its stretch of, I think it goes back to the beginning of the Muschamp era, that we've had somebody, usually both of us, but we've had somebody at every single camp, all Muschamp era, and now 8 of 8 on the Shane Beamer era. And we fully plan to hit 10 of 10 coming up this Thursday and Friday, which we got plenty of time to get into all that, but seems like there's going to be some guys definitely to keep an eye on, some guys I'm excited to see on Thursday and Friday. But let's circle back. Let's start commitment on Sunday. This was technically a commitment from 2 weekends ago as South Carolina lands Miami, Florida Christian High School defensive tackle Jamal Weiss. This was anticipated. He'd already told Jimmy Lindsey, told Shane Beamer that he wanted to be a Gamecock. Went public on Father's Day. We've got a story on Gamecock Central where he details that. As I did in the story, and I'll say it again now, sort of just we'll let Jamal explain all that in his own words. So I'd encourage you to go check that out. It's on the front page. It's free. You don't have to be a subscriber. But a kid that's been through a lot to get to where he is at. And, Chris, I think, he's a mid 3-star guy on Rivals. But when you turn on the film, when you see what Jamal Weiss is all about on the field, we saw him not work out publicly, but we saw him as far as seeing how big he is. Massive kid, 6'4", 275 pounds. And I think actually a really nice get for South Carolina. And actually Jimmy Lindsey's, he's been involved. He's had South Carolina in the mix with a ton of defensive tackle prospects that seem to be showing high interest in this program. He gets his first verbal commitment for the 2022 class, his first commitment as South Carolina's defensive line coach for that position in Jamal Weiss.
Yeah, and there is, I'll go back to my line, a lot to like about Jamal, a kid who, takes his craft really seriously. And you look at the film, a lot of traits that you look for in an interior defensive lineman, about 270 pounds right now, Wes. So, and he's grown throughout high school. And you look at his frame and he's got the ability to continue growing, putting on good weight, growing into that frame. His late father was a college football player at Marshall. So he's got some kind of those collegiate bloodlines. And when you look at him, he looks like the type that can be that interior attacking, that 3 technique attacking type of defensive tackle. He's quick. He brings kind of already a nice blend of pass rushing moves, whether it's just overpowering guys, quickness, spin move, getting after the ball carrier, getting after the quarterback. So he brings kind of some aggressiveness, plays with some violence, Wes. And I think, you look at this kid's film, good bit to like here, I believe, about Jamal Weiss.
Yeah, and as you said, man, I think he's definitely an interior player. He plays on the edge a little bit for his team, as you see here in the film. If you're watching on the video version of the show, South Carolina sees him as an interior guy. But while he is an interior guy, he's not just that sort of 330-pound nose tackle that you just put in the middle and say go plug up two gaps and sort of eat some blocks. He is, I think, a true three technique type of player. He can knife into the backfield. He's got really good explosiveness off the ball, but also has some power. Like he drives through defenders. The very first clip, you see him diving after the quarterback, just laying out full extension. So you see, I think in that play you can sort of, extrapolate. You see some effort there, but you see some athleticism there as well, just in that very first play that you saw of his film. And a kid that we can get into who's pushing and who, committable offer conversation and all that BS that people want to talk about, when you talk about an offer list. But Alabama, Florida, schools that did at some point offer and are heavily involved here. And, Miami's was heavily involved here. I mean, a kid that was relatively unknown, I would say going back to probably the beginning of 2021. I think if you look back, it was sort of early 2021. Teams started to find out about him. Kentucky offered him as well. And a kid that, I think probably because he transferred in from Ohio down to South Florida, didn't really play a ton for whatever reason last year, but then started to come onto the scene during his season last year. Sort of had been a bit of an unknown. And then once teams started to see what this kid was all about, see the film, then schools started jumping in. So talented kid, man. And just really a lot to work with here if you're Jimmy Lindsey. And it sounds like just talking to Jamal that Jimmy really was able to establish a relationship here, a bond here that I would say has gone well beyond football. You see that a lot with football prospects, certainly, but to me, this one went even a little bit further than just your typical player-coach relationship, I think.
It did. And one thing that we've learned in a very short period of time, we heard this as soon as Jimmy Lindsey was hired at South Carolina, and that we heard from some of his former players, guys that he had recruited and coached, that, he was a relationship builder type of guy. And we've it's been a little bit of a running joke, Wes, that he knows everybody. It kind of seems like he's got connections to just about everybody that walked in the door. I'm going to give you actually an example of that here soon. It's unrelated to Jamal Weiss, if we can remember it later in the show. But, there's, a connection here with Weiss. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Ryan Brubaker, the 4-star offensive lineman that South Carolina is recruiting out of Pennsylvania. He's mentioned kind of a similar thing with Greg Adkins, and that they've maybe shared some life experiences, and they have kind of that deeper connection, which helped attract Brubaker, who South Carolina is heavily in the running with, to sort of get them in the mix, get them in the game, ultimately drew an official visit. Same thing here, to where Jimmy Lindsey jumped in early on Weiss. They really connected. Obviously, were able to get him on campus, Weiss, this summer, a couple weekends ago, and that ultimately led to his commitment too. So definitely a connection there, definitely a good relationship that, like you said, man, it's more than just the typical kind of recruitment, keep in touch kind of thing. It goes a little bit deeper than that. But again, with Jamal Weiss, I like this pickup for South Carolina from a player standpoint. I think he's going to give him everything that he's got on the field and as a player. Again, all business type of approach. And the traits are certainly there when you look at his size and what he can do athletically on film.
Yeah, so he'll be a guy I'll be curious to continue to maybe watch a little bit as a senior, as he plays a lot more. And then, what he can do once he gets into an SEC strength and conditioning, SEC nutrition program, and everything that goes along with being a student athlete at that level. By the way, as you see above our head, every single episode of the show, this show is brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. ClintHammond.com is where you can find Clint, ClintHammond.com. That's 803-771-6933 is another way to find Clint. If you're in the market for a new home or you just want to refinance your current mortgage, give Clint a shout. In MLS number 71597 or C Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com. Several different ways that you can find Clint. He is the branch manager of the Columbia Mortgage Network, and every time I've had something to do with a mortgage, I have gone through Clint. It's been a perfect, smooth situation every single time. And that is not always the case. I've heard horror stories of people thinking they're approved for a loan, thinking they're approved for a mortgage, and then it gets down to the finality of it, and something's missing, something has been inputted wrong, and they don't get approved. So with Clint, I can promise you smooth situation there, and pretty much everybody who in Columbia who has used Clint has the same exact feedback. So we appreciate Clint being an outstanding sponsor, presenting sponsor here on GC Live. I'm reading the comments there. Jeremy says his team is awesome. And Craig says that Clint has a great head full of lettuce. That is very, very true. So we appreciate Clint being our guy here. So second commit, Chris. Peyton Williams, Gamecocks dip into Texas. I stupidly asked on Twitter, when was the last time Carolina added a guy from Texas? And I deleted from my brain that it was actually Shiloh Sanders. Not that long ago, a few classes ago. Who was the last guy South Carolina added from Texas before Shiloh Sanders that signed with South Carolina as a scholarship guy? Maybe should have been my other question, because I instantly was like, well, it's Elliott Fry. But Elliott came in as a preferred walk-on, ultimately was given, he earned a scholarship, but did not come in as part of the actual signing class. So that's a little trivia there. Do you know the answer off the top of your head? I do not. I've not looked it up. Maybe somebody in our comments knows, or maybe we'll effort that and get to it later on. But Peyton Williams was on campus for multiple days. This was an unofficial visit. I said to myself, wow, if a kid comes out here with his whole family from Texas on an unofficial visit, on its own dime, basically, says something about his interest. I didn't know that essentially that he was going to commit right off the bat. I thought, they'd probably get him back for an official, and then we'd go from there. But he goes public this morning, Monday morning, commitment to South Carolina. Your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid. The first thought I had, Wes, get a little bit more, obviously, into Peyton Williams as a prospect himself, but you think about needs in this class. Defensive back is obviously a huge one. And if you really get specific on that, the need to bring in some true safety type prospects, that's a position that we've harped on. We've talked a lot, been a lot of discussion with Gamecock fans, both on this program, on our forums, on GamecockCentral.com, about the safety position and how it's just been lacking. There are a lot of reasons for that. We could do a whole episode on the safety position and the history of it and recruiting and the injuries and all those things. But the bottom line is this: it's a big need in this class. So now in getting Williams, who projects as a safety, we talked about that. My conversation with him that's up on GamecockCentral.com, asked him about, hey, what has the staff talked to you about in terms of position at the next level? He said, safety. It was very quick, very simple answer. So now that you've got Williams committed and Javonte McClendon, who committed the weekend before last in conjunction with his official visit, now you got two guys in this class that can legitimately go and play safety for you. Sure, it's fine to cross-train guys. It's good to have a guy that can play nickel or safety or corner, 2 out of the 3, whatever it may be. But now you've got two guys that play the position in high school, and you feel like you can slot them there at the next level as well. Diving a little bit more into Williams specifically, we got a chance, Wes, when camp was going on, to eyeball this kid, and he has good size. I mean, he's put together well. He's that free safety, that center fielder type when you look at him on film. 6 picks, I think, last season. So he's got some good ball skills, shows pretty good instincts. He's maybe not a super flashy player, but he does a good job of tracking the ball and showing ball skills on tape. And so definitely someone that, you're right, maybe we weren't expecting the commitment at this stage, but they obviously did a really good job with him on campus this weekend.
Yeah, a kid that he's right around 6 foot, maybe a touch above, 187 pounds, which is actually a little bit above what he was originally listed at on the different sites. He's 187 now, projects as a guy who has the frame to get up above 200 pounds or so. And like you said, a true safety. I think South Carolina likes his the fact that he's been a productive guy. Like you said, 6 picks, lots of tackles on his resume. And he's a lengthy kid. He's 6 foot, but he has a big wingspan, good ball skills, sort of all those traits you're looking for, as you said, in that sort of free safety center field type position. His current team sort of uses him, all over the place. But I think for South Carolina, a true safety is something that, we've talked about how weird it is that they didn't really hit on a lot of true safeties for the last few classes. So a need there. And if I can get this going here, I'm gonna pop the film on, Chris. But I think maybe allows them to be a little bit more, I would almost say selective, Chris, because now you've got 3 DBs committed. And we know they're going to take more. They're going to need to take more. But I think you can be a little bit more selective with who you take and what you're looking for in that position moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, someone asked us today on the forums, how many guys is South Carolina going to take, whether it's DB in general or at all positions. And my answer was, look, I'm not trying to give a cop-out answer, dodge it. It's kind of hard to predict. And we've heard this at other positions in this class, Wes. It just kind of depends, because you maybe have a specific number, but then pending who you can get, you may change that number a little bit. Are you going to grab another transfer at DB for the 21 class? That's very possible. You might count that guy forward. Maybe that changes your high school numbers a little bit. But you're right in that you kind of have this baseline of now you've got 2 safeties in this class, 2 guys you legitimately feel like can play safety. They're on the board as a safety. You've got that. Now maybe you're looking at, okay, we can be a little bit more selective now. We don't have to go out and sign whoever, which that's never been part of the strategy for South Carolina, is to sign whoever. You do have to fill out a class. You have numbers and needs that you need to hit, but you try to balance that with bringing in talent that can be impactful for you, obviously. So lots of guys still on the board, including several defensive backs, West, that are projected to officially visit South Carolina this weekend. And so there's going to be a lot more to track there. But in Peyton Williams, they get a guy that checks that box of play and safety, has, some nice offers to his credit, and certainly has some size and some skills that the staff can work with to develop in the future.
Yeah, I think watching the film, man, this is a kid that'll hit you too. I mean, you're talking about a high level of football in the state of Texas. And it's interesting. I saw Colin, tweeted this. It's interesting to see how this class has come from many different areas of the country so far. You have a quarterback from Delaware. You now have a defensive back from Texas. And, they've sort of cast a fairly wide net, I would say, as far as which states they've hit. And, I think we got to give a little bit of credit here on the show, Chris, to Joe Bowen, who is a South Carolina off the field defensive assistant. He had some really strong connections to this kid and a coach of his from his time at Florida State. And that's sort of what got South Carolina in the door, got them on the radar, and ultimately they were able to get the kid in. And, I don't even know if they were expecting to get the commitment this early. I think there was sort of some hope there to get him back for an official visit at some point and make a move, but then they go ahead and get the verbal commitment, and obviously liked him enough to take it, because as we said, that I think they're in pretty good shape with several of these guys to varying degrees that have either visited officially or have visited unofficially or will visit officially this coming weekend. So I think that's going to be an interesting conversation, man, both for them internally and for us here on the show and for our members. They're obviously already asking. It's going to be interesting to see how that answer changes as we get more information. Who's a take? Who's at the top of that board? Who wants to come? And how do you sort of manage that? I think when it comes to roster management, man, who you decide to take and who you decide not to take and who you decide to sort of prioritize, that can be a huge thing when you start to look ahead 3 or 4 years and we look back on those decisions down the road.
Yeah, it certainly can be. You can't – we talk a lot about prospects in classes, recruiting rankings, stars. We watch film, we break it down the best that we can on this program, and certainly even more so on GamecockCentral.com with everything we do daily. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to wait some period of time to assess those things. South Carolina could right now be sitting here with a top 10 class and everybody would be super fired up. Do they develop? Do all the guys get into school? Does the staff properly develop them? There's so many questions, pertaining to all that. And so you do have to take that time period to look back. But what we know is that they've got to sign some defensive backs that can make an impact, And so when you look at McClendon, when you look at, this guy out of Texas, Peyton Williams, you watch the film and they're guys that look like that they can come in and help the program in some form or fashion at some level. Might be differing levels, might take a little bit of time, but certainly there's an opportunity for South Carolina to sell playing time, to defensive backs on the trail. And that's going to continue. I mean, there's 7 commitments right now in this class. There are going to be many more commitments in this class. And I think we're going to have to take an approach of looking at the entire class when it's finished, how many guys are at each position, how many are there total, how impactful are all the guys, and then ultimately, how do they develop? I think that's a key to all this.
Yeah, and development, something that has to be part of it, and some of that's on the staff, some of that's on the players themselves, and really that's why it's so hard in college football to say who's at fault for certain things, because it's sort of a combination of all of it. You just don't know where the percentages lie. So I think what I've seen so far, Chris, I believe South Carolina is filling out its class right now. And we've talked about this really for months, that June and then July, even though July is mostly a dead period, I think you're going to get that period where guys who took all these visits in June are processing everything they saw in July. So I could still see there being, in college football recruiting in general, I could still see there being a lot of activity as far as commitments in July, just because guys took so many visits in June. And maybe they didn't commit to a place while they were on campus, but they're wanting to process what they saw and then commit before, their season starts. That's always a big trend. Commit before my season starts. At the end of July, when it opens up again for a second there and kids take maybe some final visits, I think it'll be a huge run of commitments at that point. So point being, we're starting to get a feel for this class and what it's going to look like. I think they're filling it out with good, solid prospects. I think the question for this class moving forward will be, and they've got some big-time guys on campus this upcoming weekend for official visits. They've had some big-time guys in for official visits. Are the sort of elite of the elite guys, the ones that they're battling, the big boy recruiting battles, how many of those guys are going to be willing to sort of take that little leap of faith and choose South Carolina and choose the vision of Beamer and staff without sort of seeing that progress on the field yet? I think that's going to tell the story for this class, and whether or not it's a class of, some really solid guys who can fill out a depth chart, at least on paper, versus some true difference makers, along the way. I think, C.J. Smith committed to Florida over the weekend. A guy South Carolina gave they battled to the end with him. They got him in on an official visit, made the top 5, were considered one of the top contenders for him, but he ultimately picks the school I think most people had pegged as being the favorite since they offered in Florida. Can they pull off, a Jalen Glover, who they're battling Florida State and now Florida with, and Oscar Delp, you're battling Georgia with? Several of these other corners we're talking about that are coming in, are 4-star guys or higher in some cases, where they're sort of the upper level of 4-star. So that to me was going to tell the story moving forward of what this class looks like on paper anyway. Will be, can you add in sort of these solid avals with maybe stealing a guy or two and then creating a little bit of momentum in that way?
Yeah, and I think, it's important to have proper expectations at this stage, and that may frustrate some people, but you just look at reality, with the season and with recruiting. Is it realistic to expect South Carolina to come in year one, having had even a substantial portion of the 2022 class, Wes, under kind of the COVID period where you weren't able to get them on campus until this summer? in June. Is it acceptable, or is it reasonable is a better word to say they need to sign a top 10 class? There needs to be just full of difference makers. That'd be fantastic. Is that realistic given who South Carolina is going to have to recruit against? Probably not. Just like it's not realistic to expect South Carolina to win 2 games last year in a shortened season and come out and win 10 this year. Not realistic. If it happened to be fantastic. Nobody's expecting that, nor should that be the expectation. I think it's a mix of what you said. Coming into this class, making a splash by improving the roster, trying to nail your evals on guys, and then going out and ultimately winning some battles. If South Carolina is going to make that kind of incremental progress, I do think in this class they do need to win some of those battles. How many is it? That's tough to quantify. But if you can go out and, like you said, if you can steal an Oscar Delp from Georgia, if you can land, a couple 4-star receivers, for instance, and beat big competition for them, if you can sign a couple of different maker type guys at corner or safety, those are going to be the type things that take this from a class that kind of puts them back on the right track to maybe accelerating that a little bit, because the other teams around South Carolina that they're having to recruit against, that they play against every year, they're not really slowing up, and so that makes this a tougher job right now. I think when you look to 23 and 24, now that recruiting's reopened, South Carolina's hosted a lot of those guys on campus. They've done a really good job of laying a groundwork with a lot of those guys to where I get the sense, Wes, and I think we both feel it, that those are the classes that maybe are going to end up being higher ranked, provided South Carolina can show some level of on-field progress. But it is still important this year for them to go out and sign, I think, some difference makers in the 22 crop. It's just going to be a little bit harder, I think, right now to do that.
Yeah, and I think, dude, it's been pretty obvious. Clearly 2022 is a priority as well. There are guys that we've talked about on the show, and we've talked about on Gamecock Central for weeks, for months now, that are high level recruits that South Carolina is involved with, and they are huge priorities. And Antonio Williams right down the road at Dutch Fork, a guy that is a huge priority target for South Carolina. Oscar Delp, as we talked about, several of these defensive backs from out of state. But I think sort of simultaneously, there has been a real push to get as many 2023s into town as possible, to lay the groundwork, to put South Carolina in a position to make some moves with these guys, and sort of to where you're not maybe fighting from behind. It's probably the best, honest way to say it. You've already sort of got that relationship there and the comfort level, and you have to me recruiting. It's kind of in a broader sense, it's like sales. You have to if you're trying to sell an ad space, then you've got to be able to get out there and talk to as many different people as possible to try to get them to come on and partner up with you, or be your sponsor. Well, in recruiting, in order to land big time players, you ultimately have to have enough big time players interested, because you're not going to get them all. If you only have 5 studs interested in playing for you, you're not going 5 for 5. But if you have 50 great players interested, then maybe you can land 5 of them. And your fans may complain about the 45 you missed on, but you got to be happy about the 5 you got. So I think that's the key to recruiting, is getting enough of these difference makers to your campus and letting them see what you're all about, and then doing well enough while they're there that they keep cutting that list down and they have you on the list. I think then if you're in the position South Carolina is in right now, though, the hardest part is finding those guys, again, in my opinion, that are willing to take a little bit of that leap of faith and say, I'm going with South Carolina because I like maybe the coaches better, or I like my playing time opportunities better, as opposed to a more established winning program right now. And that's just sort of the nature of where you are right now if you are the Gamecocks. So, again, man, those are the 2 commitments. You can read more about each of those kids on GamecockCentral.com. We've actually got quite a bit of free stuff on them if you're not a subscriber. But if you aren't a subscriber and you want to join up, great time to do it. Use the code VISITS2021. If you're a new sub, you can actually get on for free until August 10th. So a chance for you to read all this recruiting coverage absolutely free, and see if you like what you see. Other stuff going on this past weekend, Chris. Braden Davis, South Carolina quarterback commit, was in town for actually several days. This was an unofficial visit for him almost. He spent a good bit of time on campus. He'll be back this coming weekend for his real official visit. And you talked to him. Sounded like it was everything he was looking for. Obviously, dude, Carolina, I mean, he was committed. He had showed no signs of not being committed. He's been firmly committed to the program since he announced it. But I guess there is a sense of, hey, he's never been here. So he's done not and actually been in the buildings, I mean, and met the staff. So maybe he comes down and just hates it. Like it's a situation where you've got to sort of, it's got to go well, if you're South Carolina, and by all indications, it went great for Braden Davis and company.
Yeah, all indications were. And you're right. I mean, when he was down at South Carolina in the spring, that was before recruiting had officially reopened. So he had to do kind of everything himself, self-guided tour. And, so he was able to get back on, I think, a Wednesday through a Saturday visit. So really lengthy, kind of extensive visit. And his first time, face-to-face with the coaching staff, first time in all the athletic facilities, all the academic facilities, went and looked at the engineering building. Apparently he's going to do something in engineering academically, and was really impressed with everything. And so he got to go through all that, hang out with the quarterbacks a lot. And as he described it, Wes, just kind of get a sense of what life will be like when he's a quarterback for the South Carolina Gamecocks football team. And then Saturday, of course, went out on the field, was able to throw with Marcus Satterfield, work with him a bit. There were a lot of kids there, so obviously that wasn't a one-on-one type of situation. There are several other quarterbacks there. Actually, a pretty good day for quarterbacks at that particular camp. But he was able to go out there and work some and had a great time. And we'll be back this coming weekend, Wes, for his actual official visit, where he'll be able to, help recruit guys now that he's got a better sense of where things are at.
Yeah, no doubt. Craig asked, is McCall in this weekend as well? No signs of that happening. I think if he was going to visit, it would have been that weekend when several of his teammates were in, and that ended up sort of getting canceled. Although I don't know if that visit was ever completely, entirely locked in. It was always going to be one of those things, in my opinion, that you don't consider it locked in until you see him with shoes on the ground in Columbia, South Carolina. So I think McCall, that ship is kind of sailed, would be my guess on there. I don't know if Torian Gray is still talking to him or not. I imagine you keep swinging there a little bit, but for the most part, that one appears over for in Florida State's direction. Let's see. Chris, a couple of other quarterbacks, like you said, were really, really good on Saturday. My days are all mixed up, but Kamari McClellan, class of 2024 kid, he gets an offer from South Carolina, and one of those, the way I explained it on our message board, man, was that sometimes, and this is the best scenario for us, sometimes we have an idea of who we're looking for, right? And there was probably 400 kids there on Saturday at camp.
Yeah.
Biggest group of the year, I think. That one and the Sunday camp before, those are probably the two biggest days as far as just number of total prospects there. You're sorting through a lot of guys, y'all, is what I'm trying to say. So it helps if you know who you're looking for. This was the kid we had no idea was there, but we're sitting there going, man, his quarterback the ball just pops out of his hand. So we start asking around, doing a little research, figure out it's this kid from Alabama, figure out he's class of 2024, then realize he's Kamari McClellan, and then start doing research, say, hey, this guy's already got an Auburn offer. He was actually at the Rivals Underclassmen Challenge this past week and took home the QB MVP. So not a guy that's like going to be under the radar for long. He's officially on the recruiting radar and seemed intrigued by South Carolina. I talked to him. That story has not run yet, Chris, but he said he was going to be back in the fall for a game that he was sort of a little bit surprised at just how nice the indoor was and how nice the facilities are at South Carolina. So I think probably a kid that's going to end up being a four-star type quarterback in that class, and maybe someone to keep an eye on for South Carolina in the 2024 class. We don't really know yet how that was going to play out. I think if they if they end up offering Jaden Bradford, the local kid at Chapin, they'll clearly have a good shot with him. He's in the 2024 class. Jaden Davis down the road, Fort Mill area, Catawba Ridge, he's in the 2024 class. I think they're fighting an uphill battle there. So long way to go there, but at least a name, I think, for fans to maybe file away for the future, Chris.
Yeah, and this is an example of a guy where, we're talking a lot, focusing a lot on the 22 class, but this month is so significant for the 23 and the 24 class as well to lay the groundwork. And Wes, a lot of the people that we talk to that are, around the program, kind of express that, and that, 22 is super important. They've got to make some progress in this class, getting difference makers, filling out the class, improving holes in the roster, getting better depth. We've talked about that a ton, but when you look at 23 and 24, this is a time where South Carolina actually has that buffer zone. They have that gap to where they can get guys on campus, and they're not going to decide in 6 months or whatever the math is until December, or 8 months if they decide in February. Now you've got a lengthy period of time where you can get on campus. You can have them in camp in the case of McClellan, and you like what you see. You know where you stand with them in terms of what you think. You see the film, you see them in person, you decide to offer, then you can go about building that relationship. We've talked to numerous prospects from 23 or 24 where it was their first time on campus in Columbia, and they have the benefit now of doing it under the new staff. A lot of guys, there's some guys, not a lot, but there's some guys, Wes, that we know about that have been on campus in the 22 class under the previous staff, and maybe they haven't been back yet. That's something maybe you have to battle with this 23-24 class. When you can get them on campus early under the new staff, you can go about building that relationship. And so with McClellan or a bunch of others that we've seen in 23-24, even 2025, Wes, that's an important step for them to take as they continue their recruiting efforts.
2025, I don't like that number right now. Apparently there's a 2026 kid on campus for the O-line D-line camp the other day. So we're not going into that. That's too far. We're too old. But a couple of other guys, Chris, before we get off here, I think we got to hit on. South Carolina gets Devin Hyatt, local wide receiver, 2023, on campus on Saturday. Florida defensive tackle Jamari Lyons was in for a multi-day unofficial. He'll be back on an official visit soon. And then, man, probably I would say the most highly regarded guy, or at least one of the most highly regarded class of 2023 kids that was on campus really all of June, would be Big Vic Burley, a massive human being, a true I would say potential 5-star level kid, Chris. Right now, he's a number 31 prospect in his class, according to Rivals.com, and that puts you just outside of that sort of 5-star territory most years. That puts you right in that he is firmly in the territory of he's too good not to take a swing, and he's interested enough to visit. So keep swinging here, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's the key. Now, to set expectations so that people don't try to come back and say Wes and Chris promised that they're going to land Vic Burley and 10 other 4 or 5-star players in that class. The competition's huge on this guy. Everybody in the Southeast is going to want him. Georgia is going to be a huge factor. Clemson's going to be a big factor. A bunch of other programs. But again, you have got to get a guy like this on campus to even be in the conversation. And South Carolina was able to do that. It's been a visit that they've kind of been eyeing for a while, kind of been watching and waiting. Can we get this guy on campus? South Carolina was able to do that. And so we haven't gotten any detailed returns quite yet. We'll continue working on that. But he was hanging around with Jimmy Lindsey, who's been his lead recruiter in the indoor, checking things out, got the full campus tour, campus treatment, posted some stuff on social media about it. And so from that point, that's all you can ask for. Just recruit the kid hard and try. Another one, Wes Monty Creams from Sumter, 2023 class, another big-time D lineman who looks really physically impressive. We saw milling around the indoor during camp as well, unofficial visit for him. So, again, lots of talent, especially on that defensive line that was on campus this last week.
Another kid, Chris, KJ Sampson from New Bern, North Carolina. I think, dude, that's a kid. I don't even think he's ranked yet by rivals, but I've had enough people in the state of North Carolina talk about this kid. And you look at the offer list, this dude's going to be really, really good and probably ends up being a priority for South Carolina. But a nice connection there you have with Montario Hardesty being able to, he's from New Bern, North Carolina, went to New Bern High School. There's always this sort of built-in advantage if a recruit is able to, sort of have that, or if a recruiter is able to have that connection where you can go in the school, maybe run into your old principal, maybe run into your old PE teacher. Obviously, Hardesty, what he did at New Bern is not lost on KJ Sampson based on the feedback that he provided on Twitter and in our interview with him. So I think South Carolina firmly in the mix there with KJ Sampson coming off that. And I wanted Chris to give a little bit of love to Pete Limbo's special teams camp, which we dropped by for a minute. And the fact that you had some former Gamecocks, Walker and Abbott, the former snapper when Beamer was here, Spencer Lanning, obviously kicker/punter, former NFL guy, and then Courtney Levin, who was a former South Carolina specialist. I don't know exactly what years. That would have been sort of back. That would have been Holt's era kicker. Those three guys worked the camp for Limbo. You had around 10 different other colleges were in as far as having coaches there to work the camp as well. The thought process being to give kids an opportunity there that probably maybe they're not quite on an SEC on a South Carolina level. Because, if you bring in 100 kids, most of them are not going to be on that level. You're looking to find those one or two that are. So really, really, I thought well-run, cool event there, and a nice touch there with Limbo to have the former Gamecocks working the camp.
It was, and that seemed to be more of an emphasis. Not to say guys didn't come around in the past few years. There were certainly some. But there's been more of an emphasis on it as far as getting people, even in roles around the program or being around the program a little bit more, who factored in prominently, in South Carolina's football history. We saw last week in the indoor, Jared Cook was back for the first time in a while. That was good. I think he was on campus for one of the spring flag football games a while back, but hasn't been around a ton, I think it's fair to say. And so he was around. Darian Stewart, who we've had on this show recently, Wes was around. He's been connected to that program since he retired, which is good to see for sure. And then what you said with Limbo, Beamer Limbo inviting some of those guys back for the camp. Really well organized, well run camp. Cool atmosphere over there when we got over there. So I thought that was a nice touch as well, and a really cool camp over there for those guys. Seemed like it drew a lot of really positive reviews on social media as far as those things go, West, from the guys that were actually there and participated.
Yeah, and I know Courtney Levin in particular was excited just to have the invite. It was cool to sort of feel welcomed back at the school that he played at and that he graduated from. So I know that goes a long way. And didn't it seem like during camp, and it's obviously not over, but the eight days that has happened, seemed like there were guys sort of just milling around that played at South Carolina a little bit more than in the past. And again, it happened before. I never want to be that guy. It seems like this is a trend in college sports where everything is good that a current staff does, and everything is bad that an old staff does. Like I never want to be that guy, but it does seem like there's certainly been more guys from like the previous, from the Spurrier and Holtz eras that have been around. And Eric Kimry, it seems like, has been doing a good job trying to document that and post pictures on Twitter of that. But you had J.C. Horn, Izzy Mukwamu hanging around on Saturday.
Yep. Good
sign for the Gamecocks. And, I think was an important reminder. There were a couple of people, of the people responding on Twitter when word got out that they were on campus. 99% of the responses were incredibly positive. There are still a few people who are a little bit in their feelings about sort of how things ended with JC and with Izzy in South Carolina. But I think, Chris, we got to remember that was sort of a touchy time for everybody. That was a sensitive time, I think, for all the kids in the program. Those guys have been through a lot in the program. Maybe they'll look back and be glad they made those decisions. Maybe they'll look back and wish they hadn't made those decisions. But fact of the matter is, if you take the grand scheme of Izzy and JC's time at South Carolina, I promise you they have love for that school. They enjoyed their time at South Carolina, and they represent South Carolina. So I think it's sort of time to turn the page on how that ended as well and move forward, because here's the thing, man. J.C. Horn was the first defensive player taken in the 2021 NFL draft. It helps your school, if you're a Gamecock fan out there, it helps your school for that guy to be just standing around, hanging out, when, oh, by the way, the guy that just committed to you from Texas happened to be on campus at the same position that those two guys played, and they're now in the NFL. So it helps. I literally watched a kid during the warm-up session of the afternoon part on Saturday say, oh, you know what? That's J.C. Horn. Like, is that really him? So, I mean, you got to remember, like, you can't get on your feels about this. You got to remember it's a positive for these guys to be back at South Carolina's campus.
It is. And, even since then, after, the opt-outs, all these different things, I've even talked to some prospects in Georgia who know J.C. Horn that say that J.C. since then, has told them very positive things about South Carolina and the fan base. And so he looks back on his time here, and obviously he's still coming around the program. Here's the thing, Wes. There's a section of people that get all mad if you remember, like on the Monday Night Football intros or whatever, if a guy doesn't say South Carolina or whatever school the guy went to, whatever fan base, if it's Georgia, if it's Clemson, if they say like their high school or something else, they get all mad about it. Why are they not representing us? J.C. Horn wants to represent South Carolina, and same with Israel Mukwamu. And there's a lot that went into those decisions that hasn't even been talked about, that we probably won't ever get into. Family dynamics, all sorts of different things. And so I'm with you. Time to let it go. It happened. It is what it is. Those guys are back. And we saw a lot of people associated with the program that were there with those guys, that knew them from their time here, that were going up, talking to them. They're generous with their time. They seem happy to be back. And I think it's certainly a positive to have them back on campus and to positively represent your school. It's way better than the alternative.
Yeah, lots of smiles all the way around. And the alternative, Chris, that you're talking about is this sort of just awkwardness of, well, I was at South Carolina, but I have this built up sort of resentment for my time there. And then, J.C. Horn could, if it goes the other way, there's nothing stopping him from throwing shade on Twitter, from saying, I never should have went there, from saying you should go somewhere else. So I think everybody needs to be glad that there's a positive relationship there with those guys and South Carolina. And as you said, man, lots of smiles. You could see former players there's a video of Jessica Jackson literally sprinting to go see J.C. Horn. And as you said, man, those decisions, especially, with J.C., those decisions, lots more went into all that than maybe has been put out there. So, I think we always got to remember, we don't always know what guys are going through behind the scenes or what's going on with their family behind the scenes. We only know what's out there publicly. So, yeah, dude, I think that's about it. What I'm sure we missed somebody, Chris, but is there anybody else you want to hit on before we go? There was a story you wanted to tell about Jimmy Lindsey.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to say, yes, we definitely missed out, whether intentionally or not, on a bunch of other prospects. So the ones that we did miss on, check out GamecockCentral.com, visits 2021 for the promo code. Jimmy Lindsey, there was a prospect that worked out at South Carolina's camp on Saturday named Brian Thomas Jr., and he is, of course, the junior of Brian Thomas, who was NFL defensive lineman with the New York Jets for many years. That was the only team actually in the NFL that he played for. Really good player, played college football at UAB. Now his son is a 3-star defensive lineman who worked out at South Carolina and has some college offers, including actually one from the Gamecocks, and did well at camp on Saturday. But, we joke about Jimmy Lindsey kind of knowing everybody. And I was kind of relayed this story to where Jimmy Lindsey met Brian Thomas during the camp on Saturday. And of course, once he found out, who he was, there was a connection there to where Jimmy Lindsey, I think, was at Chattanooga or something at one point when they were playing Brian Thomas, his UAB team. UAB came back and beat Chattanooga that day, and then went on and beat LSU the next weekend. And Brian Thomas was absolutely amazed, Brian Thomas Sr., that Jimmy Lindsey could remember those things and remembered that connection. So just another example there of kind of the relationships and the memory and all those different types of things. And Brian Thomas, by the way, the former NFL linebacker, I got a chance to meet him, talk with him Saturday. He was super impressed with how things are going in Columbia and impressed with the staff and the facilities and all those different things.
No doubt, man. So that'll about do it for Chris. I'm Wes. We'll be back on Wednesday. Camp will be again Thursday and Friday. So Friday show, who knows? Maybe we can record something. We said we wanted to do that last time. Did not happen. But another big recruiting weekend. So hopefully at some point we can maybe do something real quick and just record it and pop it up on Friday. But for most of the day, Thursday and Friday, Chris and I will be out bringing you live updates on GamecockCentral.com. Again, you can use that code VISITS2021 to read all about it. You know what? I know I'm biased, but I think we've had a lot of stuff on the camps. And if you are a recruiting person, or if you're wanting to get into recruiting, or if you've maybe watched it from the sort of outside looking in but want to dive into it more, great time to get on Gamecock Central. And again, it's free until August 10th if you're a new subscriber, so you can use that trial to your advantage and check out what we got. Again, appreciate everyone for joining us. See you in the live chat. Appreciate you guys and girls hanging out with us. And we appreciate Clint Hammond, our presenting sponsor, of course, from the Columbia Mortgage Network, 803-771-6933. Chris and I will be back on Wednesday.